This hour, new reporting from CNN about just why the Pentagon made the sudden decision to move military assets into the Middle East amid what the National Security Advisor calls troubling warnings from Iran. According to two U.S. officials who spoke to CNN, those threats include, quote, specific and credible intelligence that Iranian forces and their proxies were targeting U.S. forces in Syria, Iraq, and at sea in the region. Let's bring in CNN's Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr into the conversation. Also, our international correspondent Fred Pleiken, who's in Finland with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Barbara, I want to start with you. Tell us more about what your sources are telling you about this deployment.
Well, what they are saying is they do believe the threat was serious enough over the weekend that they needed to scramble some additional military force to the region. The goal right now is to deter, to make a very public show of force, get those forces there and deter these Iranian elements. They say that they were making possible plans to prepare for a strike against U.S. troops in the region, and now they want to show that an aircraft carrier is on the way, U.S. Air Force bombers are on the way, and that these Iranian groups would pay such a heavy price for any kind of action against the U.S. military that they simply need to understand they cannot succeed. They cannot do it. Multiple threads of information, of intelligence over the weekend coming about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and Iranian-backed militias. These are some of the most militant elements in Iran and may not be under the full control of the Iranian government. So this really ramped up the concern over the weekend. A number of meetings and phone calls across the Trump administration, national security and intelligence community, culminating in the very unusual announcement from the National Security Advisor John Bolton on Sunday night here in Washington that an aircraft carrier strike group and a bomber group were on the way. John?
Well, Barbara, stay with us. Fred, you're not only with the U.S. Secretary of State as he sits down with the Russian foreign minister. You've twice been on the USS Abraham Lincoln, the carrier in question here, including about a week and a half ago. Tell us about the capabilities of that carrier strike group. Essentially, tell us about the message the United States is sending here.
Well, I think, John, the message the United States is sending there is that the U.S. is very real in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Persian Gulf and is not going to back down. I was actually on the Abraham Lincoln in 2012 when it was in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Persian Gulf, and you could see it is obviously a very big deterrence for the Iranians. And I think one of the things that we need to make clear to our viewers is when a U.S. ship, when the Abraham Lincoln is in that area, is in the Persian Gulf and in the Strait of Hormuz, they're really, really close to these Iranian vessels. You could see Iranian ships from where we were. You could see the Iranian coastline back there as well. And they even had Iranian planes on the radar. So it is in very close proximity. So it would be very important for a big U.S. warship with those kind of capabilities to be in that area. From what I saw on the Abraham Lincoln about a week and a half ago, that crew obviously is, as all American carrier crews are, very, very capable, highly motivated, still very much at the beginning of their deployment. They were just in the Mediterranean Sea. But I wanted to add one more thing to what Barbara was saying, because I think it's quite interesting. I also spoke to some commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and former commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard not too long ago when I was last in Iran. And they did say to me that if there was an escalation with the United States, that one of the things that they would think of doing is A, targeting U.S. forces at sea in the Persian Gulf, and second of all, also targeting other American military installations around the greater Middle Eastern area. One of the things that they kept talking about was the missile capabilities that they have. It seems as though they do know that those missile capabilities are quite strong. They believe they could use them to retaliate against U.S. forces. One of the other things that we seem to be seeing, though, is that the Iranian government seems to think that there are somewhat divisions in the Trump administration about all this. You do see the Iranian Revolutionary Guard talking very tough on what it would do in retaliation against the U.S. But then you have, for instance, the Iranian foreign minister who came out and said, look, Iran doesn't want an escalation in all this. He keeps trying to single out John Bolton and also Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and say, look, he believes that President Trump does not want any military reaction to Iran or military intervention in Iran, but he believes that, for instance, John Bolton is much more so inclined, John.
Language like that makes you worry about a miscalculation. Barbara, at the Pentagon, now some people are saying it's unusual to have such a deployment announced by the White House, not directly from the Pentagon. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, by all accounts from the people we have talked to, it was the U.S. military over the weekend that really felt they wanted the announcement to come from the White House, that it would have much more impact on the Iranians. It would show the seriousness, and there would be no miscalculation, no mistake that this was a routine deployment planned months ago, that this was something very, very different. Now, the fact that it was put out by John Bolton may send the message that the Iran hawks are out there, but the military wanted it from the White House, John.
Oh, we'll keep an eye on this. It's obviously an ominous development. Barbara Storford-Peiken, appreciate the reporting. Thank you. Coming up for us, President Trump strikes out at China with new threats just days before trade negotiations scheduled to resume.